Look at me, still talking when there's science to do. That's right, you geeks. Welcome into the Echo Screen, the official podcast of the Clan of the Grey Wolf. As always, I am your host, the Commodore, and we're here today to talk to you about something very near and dear to our hearts here at the Clan of the Grey Wolf. Yes, video game music. Something we all know and love. I think all gamers that really love to play games, even modern games, contemporary games, but also the classical games.
Well, there's always the music that you think back on and perhaps cried a few tears over.
Well, that might be going a bit far.
Well, I heard tell that perhaps you cried a few tears over Eris's death.
You have no video evidence of that.
Oh, damn, you're right.
Anyway, but no, Rue and I, as you all should know, went recently to a concert. We went to play a video game symphony. If you are watching on the video right now, you'll see it behind us, the poster for it. And we were thinking about what a great thing it was that there was something that could celebrate video game music, the kind of best of the best of video game music. And so we always thought from that point forward we wanted to do a podcast that we could kind of talk about those things and maybe get a little historical perspective on some of the best and greatest of video game music from the history.
And of course, this is a completely subjective list. I mean, these are our favorites.
Right.
By no means necessarily what you all should like.
No.
Not that you'd agree necessarily anyway. And nothing against Atari and its wonderful boops and beeps, but we're going to start in the NES generation. So
that's right.
Late 80s.
Fast forward through all those arcade machines with the bleeps and bloops and the pops on screen. And we're going to go straight to the NES, which had a pretty advanced sound comparatively. And one of the best features of the NES was that it allowed for a much deeper sound.
Oh yeah, and the instruments that were available to it and the channels. By the time of the end of its lifetime with Super Mario 3 and so forth, they were certainly cranking out a bunch of intricate tunes with that.
Yeah, definitely. And just as a kind of background, we looked up, the NES was capable of playing 5 channels concurrently. And usually one or even 2 of those was dedicated almost, that includes sound effects. So at any given moment, you probably only have 3 channels able to play music at a time. Cool. So let's dig right in. I think there are probably plenty of examples we could use of great music from the NES. But we have to first pay homage to the ubiquitous and always present Super Mario Brothers.
Yes. And now that we've done that,
we can move right along because we're going to play a lot of music in this podcast.
It's classic, but it's not the best.
And if you haven't heard it,
that generation.
If you haven't heard it, then why in the hell are you listening to this podcast?
What is wrong with you?
How the hell did you even get here? It doesn't make any sense to me.
But you're
probably looking for like wildlife preserves of wolves or something.
Yeah.
You thought, Clan of the Grey Wolf. Okay, forget it.
Koji Kondo composed the Mario Brothers theme,
as well as other first-party Nintendo games, Zelda.
I would say Zelda was the better effort. Maybe not effort, but I just thought it was better music in general. You play the original Legend of Zelda, and you feel still sucked into it with the original theme. That it just makes you think of wilderness and legends of yore and whatnot and so forth.
Well, if you say so.
To me, I mean, the music, when I first booted up Zelda for the first time, and it was telling the story, and it had that theme going in the background, the original theme, it was very epic to me.
I think those
put me
two,
in the mood.
Are just on 2 different levels. I think Super Mario Brothers, most people know and love it and put it on their phones because of nostalgia.
Whereas it's light and happy.
Yeah, whereas...
Which is fine.
Well, that's true, but I think also the reason that people listen to Zelda still today is not just for nostalgia, but because it actually is. There are some really great melodies, and those things have been recycled and reformulated and remixed and rearranged in any number of different ways in the Zelda sequels that subsequently followed.
Mm-hmm. certainly a use for music where it has to put you in the mood, where
Right.
where it kind of gets out of the way. However, and I would say for another game or series of games on this list, when you have music that just is so awesome and out there, that also has its place. And I think perhaps in no other game series is that more evident than the Mega Man series.
Absolutely. We could have put, I guess, all of the Mega Man games for NES down here,
But
and there are plenty of great examples of music from Mega Man. But Mega Man was one of those games that we listen to now, not just because of nostalgia, but because the themes were really, really cool.
especially with Mega Man 2. I mean, they were all pretty good, but Mega Man 2 is known for its
Yeah, I agree.
really great music. And the Woodman theme and Metal Man theme, you wouldn't say that those blend in very well with the background, but
You're
it
right.
definitely just is out there and it makes you excited to be
Right.
playing this game. The way that it was presented back then also lends itself well. Almost like a rock theme,
Yeah.
which I think is why those types of songs, like the Mega Man 2 themes, are put to very good use by modern nostalgic video game bands, rock
Right.
bands such as the Neskimos.
The mini bosses.
Exactly, and
The Advantage.
and they do once again like Woodman's theme, and it is a hard rockin', very geeky rock,
But still imaginative.
still-
You know,
yeah,
imaginative
yeah.
in terms of instrumentation. They're not trying to copy the song. They're still doing some
Right.
rearrangement.
And it doesn't work quite as well if they do something like Super Mario Brothers theme. That doesn't
Sure.
work so well in a rock band format.
I can't help but wonder what a game like Mega Man 2 would feel like playing it if you were going to play the game with a completely different soundtrack, kind of updated.
Oh yeah.
So a few other honorable mentions from NES before we move on. We have to talk about Castlevania, I think.
Yeah, I think they had very good music. Not quite as to the fore and in your mind, perhaps, as Zelda or Mario, even, or Mega Man. But I mean, the classic Vampire Killer theme, which I think they've recycled a dozen times
Lots.
in different games,
Lots.
because it's pretty good. It's pretty darn good.
For that era, it is pretty
Good.
spectacular.
Right.
And I think that has helped to spawn a whole, a kind of defining generational moment of what video game music should be like, and a style that is very, very unique to Castlevania. Everybody has their own favorites from Castlevania, but they all really start at Vampire Killer.
I would say that the kind of dark horse for the category of NES music giants is DuckTales.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And that's something that I realized even way back when. You have the Moon theme,
Yeah.
the Amazon session, stuff like that.
It's
and
all actually really good.
It is all very good, especially the Moon. But something that I didn't discover until just before this podcast was that it was composed. The music for DuckTales was composed by the same guy who did the music for Mega Man 1 and Mega Man 2.
Which makes some sense. I mean, when you listen to the depth that went into the music in DuckTales, it almost doesn't fit. It's one of those things where you go,
I mean,
wait a minute, just a licensed game from Disney, and here's this really great music.
I mean, DuckTales was a great game for
It
the
was.
NES, but the music was just you expect that something on a first-party Nintendo game or something like that. It was that good, and Capcom, I guess, just pulled out the big guns for their licensed DuckTales game for some reason. But so his name is. You want to handle that?
Yoshihiro Sakaguchi,
There you go.
a.k.a. Yuki-chan's Papa, which was his, I guess a
pseudonym.
that
Yeah.
he used. I don't know. It's interesting because I was playing through some when you play through some of these old games, I don't know why. Maybe folks out there can help us out, but a lot of folks use pseudonyms or abbreviated their names or things like that in the credits when they were being listed for music or things like that. And
Maybe it's a Japanese thing.
I don't know. It's very possible. But anyway, so Yuka-chan's Papa is who's credited for both Mega Man 1 and 2 and DuckTales.
He also did what, Street Fighter and Street Fighter 2, I think.
Yes, and
So-
I don't remember those being particularly memorable for music.
But those are still big games.
They're still huge games.
It's kind of sad. I couldn't really find much that he's done more recently for video games, but
You
kinda
never know
stopped around
where
Super Nintendo.
some of these folks end up. So that's our wrap up of I think the greatest hits of, no pun intended, of music that we find interesting from the NES generation. Let's move on now to the Super Nintendo, which the Super Nintendo and / Genesis era. Both have their strengths and weaknesses.
I would say in general, Super Nintendo had the better music, mainly because it had the better audio hardware
Absolutely.
on board.
So it was capable of so much more, and it was really used very well. The Super Nintendo has a very, very different feel to it. Not only from the NES, where you have this particularly large step up, but also from the Genesis, like you said, because the Genesis is very well known for its kind of harsh, clangy,
Yeah.
metal sound. Not just in sound effects and things like that, but really in its music.
And that worked. I think that worked pretty well with the Sonic games, especially Sonic 1 and 2, which I feel this level of Sonic music dropped off after those two
Yeah.
games. Many people will disagree, but that's just how I feel. But those games, especially things like the Casino Night Zone,
Oh yeah.
and
They're actually,
Just
I mean,
Green Hill
just the
Zone.
Green Hill Zone, exactly, right? From the get-go. I think
just good music.
you're talking about how that music kind of plays into the game. I think that's almost as iconic for that moment in Sonic, as a Sega mainstay. I think if you play that music for anybody, they're going to think of Sega, they're going to think of Sonic, they're going to think of that moment. So, we have to talk about some of the greatest hits of the Super Nintendo era, and I will let you start.
I think you have to start with the master Nobuo Uematsu and his work in Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 4 and 6, which in America were 2 and 3. 5 was not released here, at least not at that time. But the music in those, I mean, the music from the original Final Fantasy, pretty good, but once again limited by the NES. When Uematsu had the whole breadth of the Super Nintendo's hardware at his beck and call, he just made that thing do tricks for him. Rose's theme, I think is Rose's theme, the Celtic Moon, is just beautiful. But really, if you want to go into, I think, the best soundtrack ever, which goes with my pick for best video game ever, is Final Fantasy VI.
Sure.
Almost all the music in that is just amazing. I mean, I first played it
Intensely thematic as well. Very, very much attaching themes to specific times or specific characters.
Everyone, there's 14 characters. Each one has a theme.
Right.
Each one's important.
And they're
Relatively
instantly
important.
recognizable. You listen to a theme, you know who it's attached
When you
to.
start that game and you see those mechs, can't remember what they're called, Magitech armors,